So, David, I thought that that interview reflected a change, as you wrote about in a column this week, that the Republicans seem to have decided they're going to worry a little less about winning the legislative battle and a little more about winning the long-term debate. Is that how you saw it as well?
Yeah, I think what Congressman Ryan was saying to us is that having a series of skirmishes over the budget and fighting to a stalemate wasn't advancing their cause of someday becoming the majority party in Washington. And I think the first manifestation of that is this getting rid of the debt ceiling issue. I mean, it's just evaporated. They're going to pass something that suspends the debt ceiling. It's going to go away until May, and after that, the Treasury will have a couple of months. So the debt ceiling issue is off the table till August. That allows them to have a fight over what they want to fight about, which is the size of government and how much should the government spend.
And that debate is going to be pretty intense. It may or may not involve showdowns, but that's the turf it's been defined now for Republicans.
What's amazing is that the whole dynamic is changed, and it wasn't really the inauguration as much as that trip to Williamsburg the Republicans took when they changed their whole strategy. Now we're almost in like a traditional legislative process where there's going to be this, debate for several weeks or months about what the budget should look like, taxes and spending. I mean, we've gone from a period where you were looking at the calendar for in 6 days, the next crisis, to a point where we've got a couple months now. Everyone can take a deep breath and kind of refigure where they're going to be. I mean, there's going to be big battles to come for sure over what we do on taxes and spending, but we have a little bit over the horizon to worry about.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I've never heard the term regular order used so much as I have in the last couple of weeks. Like, regular order, what does that mean? Well, it means Congress is going to do its job the way it's supposed to do it. Have hearings, have vote, have committees vote on bills, have the votes on the floor, and see what happens. Well, that'll only be true to some extent, but that's a big change.
Right. I think what they've done is reject this idea that we need some special committee, some commission to solve these problems.
Or talks one-on-one with the president.
Or behind-the-scenes talks between John Boehner, the Speaker, and the President. So the Senate Budget Committee says for the first time in several years they're actually going to put a budget blueprint down. And so I think there's an understanding that it wasn't working, these kind of subverting the regular committee process. But I'm also wondering whether the casualty of this will be any progress on the deficit. Paul Ryan made clear to us that at least as a bargaining position, they're not going to raise taxes any further. And President Obama has made clear he's not going to go along with cutting entitlements or benefit programs without a tax increase. And we'll have to see how much wiggle room there is there, but it sounded like a recipe, and our colleague Janet Cook asked Paul Ryan this, a recipe for a very small deal on the deficit.
Right, exactly, and no deal on entitlements, conceivably, because if you listen to the president's inaugural speech, there wasn't a whole lot of sign there that the Democrats are ready to move on and do tough things on entitlement spending.
That's right. I mean, I think the White House clearly feels validated, maybe even more than we thought. Election night, he talked about a compromise with the Republicans on the deficit. He seems to really have dug in on Medicare and Social Security. Feels like the public is with him on this. And the Republicans are kind of trying to figure out where they come at these issues, because they know that it's like touching the third rail. It can be really dangerous. So, I mean, that's where the money is. That's where a lot of the spending goes. They're going to have to be addressed sooner or later. But it seems like in the near term, both parties are kind of wary about how they're going to address
it. Right, and
I
think the Republicans are making a calculated gamble here that the public really is fed up with government spending. They really do think these programs are too big, even though they love them. And if we just point that out in clearer terms without making it sound like we're threatening anybody, we can win that debate not next week or next month, but over time. And that's a reasonable position, I think, to take.
Yeah, and we'll see if they're right. But, a lot of them are looking to what Ronald Reagan did. Ronald Reagan tried to run for president, lost to Gerald Ford in the Republican nomination thing, but several years later came back and really changed Washington. That's clearly at the back of their mind. You pointed out Bill Kristol had a column in the Weekly Standard where he recalled that and urged the Republicans to think about what does it mean to be in opposition. It means you acknowledge you can't stop things from happening. You can't make things happen. You have to give a clearer alternative in the hopes that yours will prove more popular over time.
But meanwhile, there's this argument that is you hear articulated. I was going to ask Paul Ryan about this, but we ran out of time. That people are now saying, well, deficit doesn't really matter that much. It's actually getting better on its own. I personally am not sure that argument's going to carry the Democrats very far. I think people probably do worry about the deficit.
Yeah, I think so. And as far as the White House is concerned, they're worried that it's going to crowd out some of their other other priorities like education and social programs, that sort of thing. So they want to do some things on the deficit, but they definitely feel like revenue is to be a big part of it, and that's where the rub is for Republicans. But I think it's something that, they have made some progress over the last 2 years. They've been chipping away at it. They haven't done the made the really tough decisions yet. But I think we're going to see another attempt to take a bite at the apple probably in the next 6 to 9 months.
But as Congressman Ryan said to us, only on the spending side.
Right.
As far as they're concerned.
Although it seems to me that's really a bargaining position, and we'll have to see whether they actually stick to that. I mean, they would be in a pretty awkward position if the president says, I'm willing to do something heroic on entitlements, something that annoys my Democratic left, and I have in mind a tax reform that gets rid of some deductions and credits, but uses some of that money for deficit reduction. That would seem to me, you can imagine them if they want to compromise anything up there, but especially after the inaugural and after hearing Paul Ryan, I don't hear anybody talking about, well, now that the election's over, let's figure out what to do.
No.
There seem to be a lot of hard feelings. The Republican caucus in the House clearly doesn't have its act together. The conservatives forced John Boehner to agree to have a budget that balances over 10 years. And Paul Ryan's budget, as austere as it was, doesn't even come close to that, so now he has to do that. We know that the Harry Reid, John Boehner chemistry is bad, so it doesn't seem like we have the ingredients for this famous grand bargain.
But we might have the ingredients for a really clear debate. If Paul Ryan composes a budget, as he told us he would, that balances the budget in 10 years, and the Senate Democrats put together a budget that articulates and puts in black and white, not just in words, what they believe the vision for the next 10 years is, well, then you have the makings for a real debate.
I'm confident we'll have a better debate this year. Because it couldn't have been any worse than last year, arguing about the arcana of using words that the public can't, CRs and sequesters and fiscal cliffs and all that. But the question is, will that debate lead us to progress on our fiscal issues this year, or is this an investment in progress down the road? I'm betting on the latter.